Hi, welcome to the bathtub. This is the old masturbator, Scott Bradfield, and we're doing this is the second of our post carb editions. We're doing a post carb series for the bathtub. It's like the post tech edition, only I'm not having any carbs. So if I seem behaving weird, and for example, I have a bit of a bird poo on my hand. I don't know why this is. We've done a few of these, so Dodo's getting a little free with her poo. This is our second one. We just did the announcement for our 3,000th Bathtaculars and this complete mess that I'm trying to set up for that. And the main thing is to remember is this Sunday, the 10th, we're going to do an experimental live YouTube show. So if you want to come for that, that'll be great. And then we'll try to do the 3,000th spectacular the following Sunday when I know what I'm doing, which is probably never going to be. This is the Cormac McCarthy signature, which we'll be giving PDFs away for free because that's what they're worth. They're free, and we might pass those out at the 3,000th episode if you show up, and it's basically tie in with our special series. Come on, why don't you get on my shoulder for a bit? Our special series where we're reading through all of Cormac McCarthy's novels. This is going to be a very sloppy. Well, it started off pretty well. It started very, very well organized. Dodo, you're going to go in the cage. This is our. We should be taking Cormac McCarthy seriously because he's a really serious, great American novelist. And I think a great world novelist in many ways. And I think he's also just kind of great in the bathtub. He's kind of brilliant. But she just finished molting, and she's just full of beans. She's just like constant. She's very happy. She likes to do all sorts of stuff. Here, why don't you go over here and eat this food? Here, come here. Here's some seeds for you. Here's your good seeds. We're talking about, we worked our way up. We did Sutri a few weeks ago, and we're now at Blood Meridian. And I'm going to do a really crappy job with Blood Meridian, which many people are going to be upset about, I know, because I've just completely, I've read this book several times. I love the book. I think it's kind of a brilliant book. I didn't like it as much. I mean, I have to say, I like it a lot. I do think it's one of the great American novels in many ways. I was so knocked out by Sutri, I have to say, that I loved that book very much, and I can see that the affection that you can feel for that. Whereas it's very hard to feel affection for a book that this brilliant and dark and hilarious and nightmarish. It's kind of the affection part isn't as strong as it is for Sutri. But if you haven't read Blood Meridian or you haven't read Cormac McCarthy, it might be the place to start. I don't know what to say. I read it when it came out, which would have been, oh God, when is this? 80s. I was in London, 85. So I remember I read the Picador edition when it came out in England, and he was sort of unknown up until this point. His books came out, and they were, he had a sort of small group of people who admired his work, but this got him a lot of attention. At the same time, it didn't sell that well, I don't think. It wasn't until the Border trilogy he wrote, which is a little less nightmarish. Well, a lot less nightmarish than Blood Meridian. And from the first page I picked it up, it's kind of, how to describe Blood Meridian is it's kind of beautiful prose about total horror and annihilation. It's basically the total violence of the way America was founded between all these cowboys running around and all these natives and all these Mexican people and all these different cultures, and basically a bunch of white cowboys going out and just killing anything that moves. It is hilarious and horrifying at the same time. It's escalating violence, it's meaningless violence, and it's kind of beautifully written and just absorbing. And it sort of feels like going through. It's really basically Heart of Darkness. If you got to the end of Heart of Darkness, it's the last 2-3 pages of Heart of Darkness turned into a novel about all the stuff Kurt saw up there up in the middle of nowhere, and it's just the nowhere at the heart of his human lives and these human people, these creatures who call themselves human. And that makes it sound more serious than it is. It's kind of like, and the other way I might describe it is if you've seen Sam Peckinpah. When I first read it, I kept saying to people, this is just a Sam Peckinpah movie. And it is sort of. But it takes, if you remember that scene in The Wild Bunch, when all the old cowboys decide they're going to have their last stand, and they get up and they start killing all this Mexican army to save the revolutionary soldiers and stuff. And they get up and start slaughtering everybody. It's kind of like that, only, it goes on for like, if it was a 36-hour Abel Gance movie. It just goes on and on and on. So you go through a series of episodes between someone known as the Kid and someone known as the Judge. The Judge is this hairless baby head who's just this big, tall, gaunt, kind of horrifying creature. He really is a Peckinpah character. He's like a James Coburn or a don't bite my computer, or James Coburn or a who else does he remind me of? A lot of these kind of tough guy cowboys. Lee Van Cleef, if he was hairless, and he's this older guy, and it's told like a fairy tale or a fable. So you don't have the connection. The Kid, who's your central point of view in the novel, kind of disappears through large parts of it. And the story, I don't want to give too much of the story, but there is the idea that is expressed near the end of the book that by the Judge that the Kid is sort of the best that's in human beings. He actually hesitates before he does horrible things. And the Judge keeps saying you should just do the horrible things because that's what you do. It's a world of total death. And again, I come back to this again. When you read these books, and I don't feel the same way about Suttree, but when you read the darkest books of McCarthy, they remind me a lot of Thomas Ligotti. They're really comedies about the fact that we're all mired in death, whatever we do, whatever we seek to do, and the horrible visions that come out of this book, all the different violence. For example, the type of story that is based on the history of the founding of this, or the creation of this country, was at one point the government would tell cowboys, if you go out, you bring back scalps from all these people, the natives. You bring a scalp, we'll pay you money. And so there's a guy in here named Galanton who's just the evil cowboy, guy. He leads this army of this posse out there to fight, to kill natives. And basically anyone with dark hair, he kills them and chops their hair off. And it's just, it is, the scenes are all narrative. He really tells a terrific narrative story, one scene after another. And he's really a beautiful technical writer, besides kind of a nightmarish vision of the world. I would say one other thing before I finish. When I remember this now, I was thinking about it today. This is why I didn't want to speak too much about Blood Meridian and all the kind of historical, the comments McCarthy's making on history and the foundation of the American horror show and the violence inherent in the way this country was built. All of that stuff is interesting, but it's not why the book is a pleasure to read. It's a pleasure because every sentence is narratively beautiful. It's beautifully written. It's not as exciting for me as Suttree, I'll have to say, or even the previous books. This time through, I liked it very much, but you don't have that connection to the Kid that you do with some of the other characters, even the horrible characters in earlier McCarthy novels. But I was thinking back the first time I'd read McCarthy a couple times, and I'd written about him, and I'd reviewed a couple of his books, and I was teaching at UConn, and almost all of my grad students were always great. And I remember putting Blood Meridian on for a grad class once, and I used to go to these classes. I had no idea what to say. I literally had, I had no idea what you said about Blood Meridian. You could talk about the history and all that other stuff and the commentary on the American Empire, etc., blah blah. But the actual beauties of the book are hard to talk about, and I would try to talk about those, and I try to talk about them on this show. But you can't really do that. It really is what you feel in the bathtub when you're reading the damn book. So anyway, I wanted to say I taught it, and I remember going into the class, and the students were really kind of excited about McCarthy, and they're excited about the book, and they've gone out and done a lot of research, and they came in with these like talks about, there's a scene where where the judge brings out a bunch of gypsies, and they're reading everybody's fortunes. The judge is this really interesting character. He's like this super genius who goes around he's like God, taking records of everything he can find, writing down everything. And they would turn over certain cards, like the Three of Cups, I think it was. And my students had gone off, and McCarthy had actually literally chosen these things for a reason. He was actually making a little commentary. They were all very symbolic scenes about what these cards meant. I forget completely. All I remember is all my students came in with all these great ideas about the book and things that they had read about and learned about the book. I didn't know any of them, and I forgot them all. I forgot every one of them. So I didn't want to I can't be an expert on this book. I'll read one passage, And oh my gosh, I did it again. No, wait, here it is. One passage which kind of just gives you an idea of how he writes beautifully about these events, and then kind of expresses them as a larger human nightmare of beauty. It's a beautiful nightmare, or nightmarish beauty, one of the two. Anyway, this is describing how they're going off around just killing and murdering people, and what they discover these ancient paintings. The judge is kind of a historian. He's a natural historian. He likes to go out and dig things up and learn things about the history of the world, all of which he thinks is pretty horrible. This is page 180. They killed wild meat, and they took what they required by way of commissary from the pueblos and estancias through which they passed. One evening, almost within sight of the town of El Paso, they looked off toward the north where the Chilenos wintered, and they knew they would not be going there. They camped that night at the Hueco tanks, a group of natural stone cisterns in the desert. The rocks about in every sheltered place were covered with ancient paintings, and the judge was soon among them, copying out those certain ones into his book to take away with him. They were of men and animals and of the chase, and there were curious birds and arcane maps, and there were constructions of such singular vision as to justify every fear of man and the things that are in him. There's a really characteristic McCarthy sentence. Of these etchings, some bright yet with color, there were hundreds, and yet the judge went among them with assurance, tracing out the very ones which he required. When he had done, and while there yet was light, he returned to a certain stone ledge and sat a while and studied again the work there. Then he rose, and with a piece of broken shirt he scalpelled away one of the designs, leaving no trace of it, only a raw place on the stone where it had been. Then he put up his book and returned to the camp. Just the casual observation of what he sees as this historic, this ancient violence and evil in human life. Again, it's an extraordinary novel. It may not be your cup of tea. It's not a picture of the world. It's palatable in any way, but it's a beautiful piece of reading, and it really does narratively just keeps you absorbed. He really knows how to create a scene and set up characters and just tell a story and see things. He's just visually a beautiful book. Okay, that's all I have to say. Nothing you can take home for your grad program. But I do hope I have encouraged a few people to try McCarthy, and we're going to keep reading through the mid and late period of McCarthy, which I think is pretty interesting too. Every one of his books is very different, and there's no other book. And one of the things that was surprising about the Border trilogy after this is very different from Blood Meridian. Just as Blood Meridian is a very different book narratively from Suttree. All right, take care. Bye. Oh, 3,000 subscriber. Be here the 10th of July and the 17th of July, 1 p.m. Pacific Coast time, and see if we're here, because we have no idea if we'll be able to make it work. Bye.